A black single dad walked into that restaurant praying for one peaceful night and walked out with his entire life split open because the woman he came to meet didn't just reject him, she tried to bury him in front of everyone. And that's when the woman at the next table leaned close and whispered, "If you're still free." He almost turned around and left before he even reached the hostess stand. Not because the place was too fancy, though it was, not because he didn't belong, though the room was built to make him feel like he didn't. It was because his phone still showed the babysitter's lost message, Malik finally asleep. He asked if he'll be back before breakfast. Breakfast. That word did something to a father who measured his whole life in small promises kept. He'd promised his little boy pancakes in the morning. He'd promised he'd come back. He'd promised he wasn't going to let anybody take him away again. So he adjusted the cuffs of his one good button-down, checked the small envelope in his inside pocket, his tip money from the last 2 weeks set aside for this night, and he walked forward like he wasn't scared. The hostess gave him the look, the one that travels fast, shoes to shirt, shirt to face, face to skin. Then she smiled like it was her job to make him feel welcome, while her eyes quietly asked what he was doing here. "I'm meeting someone," he said. "Name?" "Cynthia. Cynthia Harrow." That name changed her posture, like she'd just been told a VIP was arriving. "Oh, of course, right this way." And that's when Malik knew he'd already stepped into somebody else's world, somebody else's rules, and the only reason he'd been allowed through the door was because Cynthia's name was the key, not his. They led him to a table near the center of the dining room, not tucked away, not private, right where everyone could see him, under a chandelier bright enough to make every insecurity sparkle. He sat down, and immediately felt eyes on him. Two men at the bar glanced over, then back to their drinks, like they'd just confirmed a prediction. A woman in pearls looked him up and down and leaned toward her husband, whispering something that made him smirk. Malik ignored it. He'd learned to survive rooms that didn't want him in them. He'd survived worse. He'd survived being called sir by police officers who meant suspect. He'd survived teachers who said his son was behind when Malik knew the truth. His son was grieving. He'd survived the day his wife's family showed up at the funeral and acted like Malik didn't deserve to stand close to the casket. He'd survived that phone call afterward when his mother-in-law told him with a voice like cold glass, "We'll be discussing custody." As if his boy was property, as if grief was a courtroom sport. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be a blind date. His cousin had insisted, "Bro, you've been alone too long. You need a night where nobody calls you dad and you can just be Malik." Malik had laughed. "I'm always dad." "Exactly. That's why you need this." The woman's name was Cynthia. She'd seen a photo. "She's classy," his cousin said. "Professional. Wants a man with stability." Stability. Malik had almost said no right there, because stability was a lie he performed every day for his son. A costume stitched together with overtime shifts, unpaid bills, and a smile he wore like armor. But then he remembered Malik's small hands in his, and how his boy had looked up and asked, "Daddy, are you lonely?" And Malik said no, but the truth had been heavier than the word. So he said yes. 5 minutes passed, then 10. He checked his phone once, then forced it back down. He didn't want to look needy. He didn't want to look like a man who got dates. He didn't want to look like a man who could be abandoned. Because the worst part about being a single father wasn't the work, it was the waiting. Waiting at daycare doors, waiting for the doctor to call back, waiting for the court letters, waiting for the other shoe to drop. At 14 minutes, Cynthia arrived. She didn't walk in like she was late. She walked in like she was making an entrance. Tall, perfect hair, white blazer draped like a flag of victory, perfume that hit the room like an announcement. She scanned the restaurant with a practiced smile until her eyes landed on Malik, and then, just for a flicker, her smile slipped. Not surprise, disappointment, like she'd opened a gift and found the wrong item inside. She approached the table slowly, heels clicking like judgment. Malik stood. "Cynthia?" She didn't offer a hand, didn't hug, didn't smile with her eyes. "Yes," she said, and her gaze flicked to his chair, then to the seat across from him as if she needed to confirm this was real. "You're Malik." "That's me," he said, still polite, still trying. She sat down without acknowledging him standing, so he sat too, and the awkwardness settled like ash. A server appeared, cheerful and eager. "Good evening. Can I start you with sparkling water?" "Yes," Cynthia said, instantly, sparkling, and for him, she hesitated, eyes sliding over Malik again like a quick insult. Still. Malik kept his expression neutral. "Still is fine." The server left. Cynthia took out her phone and placed it on the table, screen up, like a tiny camera. "So," she said, voice bright but sharp at the edges, "my friend set this up." "Same, my cousin," Malik said. Cynthia nodded, like she'd expected that. "Right." She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice, the way people do when they want to sound intimate while they cut you open. "I just want to clarify something before we waste each other's time." Malik blinked. "Okay?" She topped her manicured nail on the table. "Your profile said you are a father." Malik's shoulders tightened. "Yeah, I have a son." "And you have him full-time?" "Yes." Cynthia exhaled, slow, theatrical, like she'd been handed a burden. "So you're like a single dad, single dad?" Malik smiled politely. "That's usually what it means." Cynthia's eyes narrowed. "And where is the mother?" The question hit him like a slap because it wasn't curiosity, it was accusation dressed up as conversation. "She passed," Malik said quietly. For a second, Cynthia's face froze, like she'd almost stepped into sympathy, then remembered she didn't want to. "Oh," she said, quickly smoothing it over. "That's sad." Sad. Like his wife was a tragic detail in a story Cynthia didn't want to read. Malik nodded once. It was. Cynthia's gaze drifted past him, scanning the restaurant again. "So, what do you do?" "I manage shipping for a medical supply company," Malik said. "It's stable, good benefits." Cynthia laughed softly. "Shipping." "It's a management role," Malik added, not defensive, just clarifying. "Sure," she said, smiling like she'd already decided what he was. "So you're not like an entrepreneur." "I'm not. I'm a father. I work." Cynthia tilted her head. "And you brought an envelope?" Malik's stomach dropped, his hand instinctively pressed against his inside pocket. He didn't realize it had made a slate bulge in his shirt. "It's nothing," he said. She leaned closer, lowering her voice even further, except it wasn't quiet enough. It was the kind of quiet meant to be heard. "You're not going to pull out cash to pay for dinner, are you?" she whispered, eyes glittering with amusement. "Because that would be embarrassing." Malik felt heat crawl up his neck. Around them, the dining room noise kept moving, forks clinking, laughter rising, yet he could feel the air tightening around his table. "I'm paying however I pay," Malik said calmly. "It's not embarrassing." Cynthia sat back, lips pursed. "I just have standards. I'm used to a certain level." Malik nodded slowly. "And what level is that?" She smiled, but it wasn't kind. "A man who doesn't come with complications." Complications. His son, his grief, his life. Malik's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "My son isn't a complication." Cynthia lifted a shoulder. "You can say whatever you want, but let's be honest, single dads are a lot." Malik stared at her, trying to decide if this was real or if he'd walked into some prank. Then Cynthia glanced towards the entrance and her eyes lit up, like rescue had arrived. A man walked in wearing a suit that looked expensive even from across the room. He moved with confidence, and the hostess practically glowed as she guided him inside. Cynthia's posture shifted. She sat taller, smoothed her hair, smiled big. Then she looked at Malik, and her smile turned cruelly polite. "Actually," she said, voice suddenly loud enough to carry, "I think I made a mistake." Malik's heart thudded. "What?" Cynthia stood up, picked up her phone, and said, still loud, "I didn't realize this was the kind of situation where I'd be expected to play stepmom on a first date." Malik felt every head turn like a spotlight snapping on. He stayed seated, voice low. "Cynthia, that's not what this is." She laughed, shaking her head. "I'm sorry, I just can't do it. I don't date men with baggage." Baggage.
He could hear a quiet murmur ripple through the room. A few people looked away like they didn't want to be caught watching. Others leaned in like it was entertainment. Malik ignored it. He'd learned to survive rooms that didn't want him in them. He'd survived worse. He'd survived being called sir by police officers who meant suspect. He'd survived teachers who said his son was behind when Malik knew the truth. His son was grieving. He'd survived the day his wife's family showed up at the funeral and acted like Malik didn't deserve to stand close to the casket. He'd survived that phone call afterward when his mother-in-law told him with a voice like cold glass, "We'll be discussing custody." As if his boy was property. As if grief was a courtroom sport. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be a blind date. His cousin had insisted, "Bro, you've been alone too long. You need a night where nobody calls you dad and you can just be Malik."